There is a silence between couples that no words can mend. A kind of silence that echoes louder than rage, more deafening than a scream. It is not the silence of peace, but the silence of performance. A quiet ritual where both wear masks, polished smiles, rehearsed reassurances, nods of agreement, not born of truth, but fear. Fear of confrontation, fear of rejection, fear of being seen. Marriage, the sacred union, was never meant to be a masquerade. And yet, most walk into it wearing the armor of societal expectation, not the naked skin of authenticity. They don't marry each other, they marry their projections. He marries her obedience. She marries his potential. They don't say, I see you. They say, I hope you become who I imagine you to be. But when you build a house on illusion, every storm becomes an apocalypse. Carl Jung warned us, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. And so many call the collapse of their marriage fate. They call it irreconcilable differences, as if honesty was never an option. But it wasn't fate, it was fraud. A fraud of silence, of avoiding the hard conversations, of not telling the truth when it was inconvenient, of being so afraid to hurt the other that you forgot how to protect yourself. Marriage without honesty is not intimacy. It is entrapment. It is the slow death of the soul by 1,000 swallowed truths. We romanticize unity, but real unity demands collision. Real unity says, I will not lie to you to keep you close. Real unity walks into fire with eyes open, knowing that every truth revealed is a risk and a gift, because only through the breaking of illusions can true love emerge. What most call love is dependency dressed in devotion. A child's need to be held masquerading as adult partnership. They say, you complete me, and they mean it literally. They bring their half-formed identity to the altar and ask another to make them whole. But wholeness cannot be borrowed. You cannot outsource your soul. Jung's concept of individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, applies not just to the individual, but to the union. Two incomplete people cannot merge into completion. They can only merge into confusion. To marry without knowing who you are is to sign a contract of mutual amnesia. You agree, silently, to forget yourselves in service of the image. And what an image it is, the curated life. The couple that looks perfect in photos, that nods in social settings, that laughs at parties with strangers while dying in private. He sleeps in silence next to a woman he no longer understands. She pretends she's fine while scrolling through the highlight reel of other people's happiness, wondering when her fairy tale turned into a polite negotiation. Because honesty is not just about words. It's about energy. It's about authenticity of being. It's about having the courage to say, I'm not okay, even when the world applauds your performance. It's about the sacred rebellion of choosing truth over harmony, because sometimes harmony is just disguised decay. You cannot build forever on a lie, and yet so many do. They build families, careers, homes, castles made of deception. Every time they suppress their truth to keep the peace, they dig another grave for their integrity. Every it's fine when it's not, every I agree when they don't, every I'm happy when they're hollow, adds another brick to the wall between them. Until one day, the silence is so loud it chokes them. Because silence is never empty. It is filled with everything you're too afraid to say. And so, marriages end. Not because of what was said, but because of what wasn't. The truth unspoken, the need denied, the desire abandoned, the resentment unexpressed. All of it festers in the dark, morphing into monsters that consume what could have been. The tragedy isn't that people fall out of love. It's that they never dared to love in the first place. They loved an illusion, a version of the other sanitized and safe, a version of themselves that didn't threaten the equilibrium. They feared chaos so much they sacrificed aliveness. But real love is chaos. It's not safe. It demands everything. It asks you to dismantle every defense, to strip away every mask, to bleed your truth into the open and let someone witness your becoming. It asks you to be vulnerable not once, but every day. To say the thing you think might ruin everything because it's the only way to save your soul. To admit that you've changed, that you no longer want what you once did, that you've betrayed yourself in the name of harmony. To confront the parts of you that stayed silent out of fear and choose again and again to speak. Honesty is not a tool, it is the terrain. Without it, love cannot breathe. Without it, marriage is not a bond, it is a performance. And the audience is always the world. We were not meant to perform, we were meant to become. So burn the script, tear down the set. Look them in the eyes not as a spouse, but as a Suland ask, do you want the truth or do you want the comfort? Because you cannot have both. Comfort is the sedative. Truth is the awakening. One keeps you asleep in a beautiful dream. The other pulls you out, gasping and alive. The question is, do you want to live? Because living requires courage. And courage means choosing truth even when it burns. It means standing in front of the one you love and saying, this is who I am. No more masks, no more lies, no more pretending. It means walking through the fire of authenticity and knowing that if they cannot meet you there, you will still choose yourself. Because the cost of self-betrayal is too high. You don't need a perfect marriage. You need a real one. One where truth is the foundation, where honesty is not just allowed, it's expected, demanded, revered, where love is not measured by how much you agree, but by how bravely you differ, where the goal is not peace at all costs, but aliveness at any cost. You were not born to be agreeable. You were born to be true. And when two true beings meet, something miraculous happens. They don't complete each other, they amplify each other. They don't fix their mirror. They don't tame, they liberate. This is the marriage worth fighting for. The marriage worth burning illusions for. The marriage that does not ask you to shrink, but to rise. So if you find yourself in a union built on silence, ask, what am I not saying? If you feel dead inside, ask, what truth have I buried? And if you are wearing a mask, ask, who would I be if I burned it? Because the mask will keep you married, but it will also keep you miserable. And your soul was not made for misery. It was made for truth. It was made for fire. It was made for the kind of love that does not flinch in the face of honesty, but welcomes it like a long-lost friend. Burn the mask and watch what's real rise from the ashes. The truth, when finally spoken, doesn't sound like thunder. It sounds like silence cracking, like a dam breaking beneath the weight of all the I'm fines you've ever uttered. It doesn't come dressed in eloquent sight, stumbles out, raw, clumsy, breathless. And still it is the most sacred sound in the world, because it's real, and reality is holy. You must understand your silence is not compassion, it is fear. Your compliance is not love, it is survival. You've been taught to equate conflict with danger, honesty with destruction. You've internalized that to love is to tolerate, to endure, to accept at the expense of self. But that is not love, that is martyrdom, and marriage is not a crucifix. Marriage is an altar, not where you sacrifice who you are, but where you bring it completely unhidden, unfiltered, unedited. To marry with honesty is to say, I will not play a role. I will not be your fantasy. I will not contort my truth to soothe your wounds. I will walk beside you, not beneath you, not above you, but as myself, flawed, sacred, changing. Because change is not betrayal. Growth is not abandonment. And evolution is not infidelity. But in a dishonest marriage, your growth will be punished. Your evolution will be treated as a threat. Your truth will be weaponized against you. Because anything that challenges the illusion becomes the enemy. The illusion that everything is fine, that you are satisfied, that nothing is missing, but you know something is. And it's not more affection or more dates or more communication tips from an Instagram therapist. What's missing is honesty, the radical kind, the kind that risks being misunderstood, the kind that risks being alone, the kind that says, I love you, but I will not lie to stay with you. And perhaps they will leave, or perhaps they will finally wake up, because your honesty is not the enemy. It is the invitation, the call to rise, to meet you on the battlefield of truth and co-create something that transcends the script, something alive. You cannot heal what you refuse to reveal. So long as you hide, you teach them to love a ghost. And ghosts can't hold you. They can't challenge you. They can't grow with you. They just haunt the walls of your home, whispering of what could have been if only you had dared to speak. But daring is difficult, especially for the one who has built their identity around peacekeeping, around being liked, around being agreeable. But peace without truth is poison. And being liked is not the same as being loved. You can be liked for your mask, but you can only be loved for your truth. So take off the mask. Slowly, if you must. Gently, if you need to. But take it off. Let them see the parts you've hidden, your unmet needs, your suppressed dreams, your true desires. Let them see the fire in your belly, the ache in your chest, the questions that keep you up at night. Let them see your humanity. Because if they cannot love you there, they do not love you at all. They love the idea of you. The version of you that never disrupts, never demands, never dares. But that version is dying, starved, suffocating, beneath the weight of pretending. You deserve more, and so do they. Honesty is not cruelty. It is clarity. It is the gift of no longer navigating a maze of assumptions and unspoken resentment. It is a breath of fresh air in a house grown stale with years of unspoken tension. Clarity will either deepen your love or dissolve your illusion. Both are blessings, because you were not meant to rot in a comfortable lie. You were meant to burn through it and rise in the aftermath, reborn. And yes, it will hurt. The truth always does. Like the sun after years in the dark. Like waking from a dream where everything made sense. But pain is not the enemy. Avoidance is. Avoidance builds prisons. Pain breaks them. You may find that honesty ends the marriage. Or you may find that it finally begins it. Either way, you win. Because truth is never a loss. What is a loss is living your one wild and sacred life in a cage of politeness and pretense. You do not owe anyone your silence. You owe yourself your voice. You do not owe the relationship your mask. You owe the world you're becoming. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for another is tell them the truth they don't want to hear, so they too can stop pretending, so they can stop clinging to the dream and start facing the real. Because maybe they're waiting too, waiting for someone to break the spell, to crack the porcelain smile, to scream through the silence and say, this isn't working. Not like this. Not without truth. And that scream is not the end. It's the beginning. The beginning of a marriage where no part of you is banished to the basement of what's convenient. The beginning of a union where every feeling is welcomed, every truth is honored, every change is met with curiosity, not control. A marriage where you don't have to dim your light to stay in love. Where you don't have to bend your will to avoid a fight. where you don't have to betray yourself to keep someone close. That kind of marriage is rare, because it requires two warriors, not soldiers trained to obey, but warriors trained to speak, to listen, to face the mirror and not flinch, to hold the grief of past lies and build, brick by brick, something worthy of their souls. So be that warrior. Speak, not because you're angry, not because you want to punish, but because you want to live. You want to be known. You want love that doesn't just tolerate who you are, but reveres it. And if that costs you the relationship, so be it. Because the only thing more tragic than a failed marriage is a life unlived, a soul unseen, a truth unsaid. Let them leave if they must, but never leave yourself again. Because when you leave yourself, you become a stranger in your own story. You walk through your days like a ghost in someone else's home, smiling, nodding, fulfilling the role, but inside, a storm rages. A storm of unlived truths, of desires denied, of dreams abandoned at the altar of domestic peace. That is not love. That is surrender. Not the sacred kind, but the kind that erodes your soul day by day until you forget what it even felt like to be alive. Do not call it loyalty when it is fear. Do not call it compromise when it is erasure. To stay silent so another feels safe is not noble. It is self-abandonment in slow motion. And there is no medal for dying quietly. This is not about blame. This is about awakening. Because most are not malicious. They do not seek to harm you. They simply learn it just as you did, that love means avoiding conflict, that truth is too dangerous, that peace is preserved through silence. But peace bought through silence is built on debt, and that debt is paid in resentment. Resentment, the silent killer of every sacred union. It doesn't arrive with fury. It seeps, it simmers. It shows up in the turn back, the avoided eye contact, the it's nothing that hides everything. It is the bitterness of 1,000 swallowed truths. And eventually, it spills in sharp words, in cold distance, in betrayal masked as escape, all because you didn't speak when the truth was still small enough to hold gently. You must understand, honesty is not the storm. Honesty is the lighthouse in the storm. It is the only thing that can guide you back to shore when everything else is breaking. Yes, it will shake the foundation. But if your love cannot withstand truth, it was never real. It was a performance held up by fear. The world taught you to fear your truth, to polish your rough edges, to be agreeable, adaptable, pleasant, especially in partnership, especially in marriage. But Jung reminds us, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Not who they expect, not who they prefer, who you are. And becoming who you are is not an individual act. It is a relational revolution. Because when you show up as yourself, everything changes. The dynamics shift. The power games dissolve. The masks drop. You say, this is me. I will no longer betray myself for your comfort. And that declaration sets fire to every false agreement you ever made. The unspoken deals that said, I won't speak if you don't challenge. I'll pretend if you keep pretending. I'll shrink if you don't leave. All of it burns. And in the ashes, a new path reveals itself. Not the easy path, but the honest one. A path where love is not conditional upon your compliance. A path where your truth is not punished, but praised. A path where you are not merely tolerated, you are cherished in your rawness. That is the only path worth walking. Because what is marriage if not the container for your full becoming? Not a cage to keep you predictable, but a crucible to refine your truth. Not a transaction of duties, but a dance of evolutions. And evolution demands honesty. brutal, holy honesty, the kind that makes you tremble before you speak, the kind that leaves you breathless afterward, the kind that changes everything. So many marriages fail, not because people fall out of love, but because they never fell in love with the truth. They fell in love with the dream, the fantasy, the idea. But dreams, no matter how beautiful, cannot hold you in the night. Only truth can. Only the hand that knows your soul, not your mask, can meet you in your darkness and say, I'm still here. Not for who you pretend to be, for who you are. And that kind of love, that love is rare. Not because it doesn't exist, but because most are too afraid to demand it. Too afraid to risk loneliness. Too afraid to walk away from comfort. But comfort is not connection. Comfort is what you settle for when you've stopped believing in magic. But magic exists. It exists in the pause after a hard truth, when they look at you not with rejection but reverence. It exists in the trembling hands that reach for each other after the silence breaks. It exists in the fierce, feral devotion that grows when you both stop pretending. That's the love you were born for. The love that expands you. That doesn't ask you to be less but more. That doesn't just survive. Time it deepens through it. But it can only begin when the mask ends. So what are you hiding? What truth have you been choking on? What would you say if you weren't afraid? Say it. Not later. Not tomorrow. Now. Because life is short, and silence is long, and your soul is waiting. And if they leave, let them. Better an honest ending than a lifetime of pretending. Because your truth will not kill love. It will kill illusion. And illusion is not love. It is the counterfeit that passes for love when we are too afraid to demand the real thing. So demand it, be it. And if they stay, you'll know. You know that they are not in love with the mask. They are in love with you. Finally, truly, fiercely. And that is the only love worth fighting for. So burn the mask. Burn it with every unsaid truth lodged in your throat, with every night spent lying beside someone you can no longer reach, with every yes that betrayed a screaming no inside your soul. Burn it, because you were not born to live someone else's life. You were not born to be a whole. You were born to be real, to love with the raw, unfiltered truth of your being, to speak words that slice through illusion, to look into another's eyes and declare, I am here, not to please, but to be seen. You were born to be known, not the polished version, not the agreeable facade, but the wild, trembling, radiant part of you that you've hidden because you feared it couldn't be loved. But that part, that is the only part worthy of love. And if love cannot embrace your truth, then you haven't lost love. You've escaped a prison. Truth does not destroy what is real. It only destroys the illusion. Let it. Because only when illusion collapses can real love begin, not weighed down by expectation, performance, or self-abandonment. And if you now stand among the ashes of what you thought was forever, look again. Ashes are not the end. They are soil. And in that soil, if you're brave enough to plant your truth, what grows will not be another polished compromise dressed as love. It will be a life. Your life, untamed, uncompromised, unapologetic. A life that no longer bows to the world's conditioning. A life that no longer dims for harmony. A life no longer shackled by vows, built on pretending. Only you, fully you, undeniably you. Let the world see you before it convinces you to hide again. Love with presence, not performance. And if someone can stand in the fire of your truth, where your wounds and your wildness live side by side and still say, I'm not leaving, then you'll know. You're not acting anymore. You're alive in a love that doesn't need masks to survive. And that is the only love that was ever real.